Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Medical shortages, transport delays, the risk of public disorder and rising prices of food. None of this is new, perhaps, but it comes to us for the first time from the government's own documents. Revealed a short while ago the preparations it's making for no-deal Brexit. Ministers were forced to publish after Parliament voted the public should be told. But that was just tonight. This morning, the Prime Minister was accused by Scottish judges of giving unlawful advice to the Queen over his decision to suspend Parliament. MPs tried to return to the day job, tricking back into the House of Commons this afternoon. But Parliament won't actually be recalled unless the judgment is upheld by the Supreme Court next week. This evening, the Brexit Minister suggested people would be asking if the judges who'd made the ruling were actually impartial. Is this all part of the cunning plan, or have we hit a brand new low? Well, Nick Watt, our political editor, is with us. Talk to us first about the documents, Nick, and what's actually been revealed there.
Well, the government has half complied with that demand from Parliament, so no to the release of correspondence between named advisers on what they were saying about the suspension of Parliament. The government's view on that is that that would be a breach of the parliamentary framework, i.e. the law governing those sorts of communications. But yes to releasing the government's preparations for no deal. Important to point out, though, that this is a document based on the planning assumptions of the last government, and it is very, very similar to a document that was leaked to the Sunday Times last month. But nevertheless, it is very interesting to see what the worst case scenario was predicted just a month ago by the government. And let's just take a look at what it says. So interestingly, the document talks about how a lack of trader awareness means that there could be a 40 to 60% reduction in the flow of HGVs across the English Channel. A second area that's interesting, it talks about how medicines will be particularly vulnerable to delays across the Channel. Then, interestingly, there's a very interesting line talking about how if there are any rises in the price of food, that will disproportionately affect low-income areas. And the last area that we're looking at, it's talking about how the government's proposal for no border checks with limited exceptions, that will be unsustainable.
You said this was similar to the Sunday Times report, the leak. Where are the differences then?
Well, there are two big differences, helpfully explained by Rosamund Irwin, who is the Sunday Times journalist who got this scoop. She talks about how the headings are different in the two documents. So in the Sunday Times one, it talks about how it's a base scenario. In other words, that could well happen. In the government version of that, it talks about how it is a reasonably worst case scenario, i.e. this really won't happen. Now, interestingly, Michael Gove, in his letter this evening, talked about how, obviously this is advice from the last government, he will publish an updated sort of scenario, and what obviously the government will hope is that will show all the work that this government has taken to prepare for no deal. The other big difference is in the document released today, there's a big redaction, lots of sort of black ink, and Rosamund Irwin says that that deals with the bit where the document talks about the government's plans for a 0% petrol import tariffs. That will lead to big financial losses, and it will lead to the closure of 2 refineries.
Wow, so it's the fuel stuff. Nick, we mentioned the finding by the Scottish judges today that the suspension of Parliament was unlawful. Just talk us through the ramifications of that.
Well, it's quite a thing for the Prime Minister to be accused of obstructing Parliament and then giving unlawful advice to the Queen. And there's been a big row in government after Tom Newton-Dunn, who's the political editor of The Sun, after he got the impression from within government that the government thought that these judges were politically biased. Robert Buckland, the Lord Chancellor, felt so strongly about this that he tweeted that he had total confidence in the independence of the judiciary. And there's another row tonight. As you were saying, Kwasi Kwarteng, the energy minister, he said that there are many people who are questioning the impartiality of judges. It's important to say that Kwasi Kwarteng says he doesn't believe that. He does support judges. He thinks that they are impartial. Those remarks have sparked deep unease in the cabinet this evening. Now, this is what Kwasi Kwarteng had to say.
I think that they are impartial. But I'm saying that many people, many Leave voters, many people up and down the country are beginning to question the partiality of the judges. That's just a fact.
That was Kwasi Kwarteng earlier this evening. Hilary Benn joins us now, and the chair of the Brexit Select Committee, as well as the Conservative MP and ex-Minister Tobias Ellwood, and the SNP's Westminster leader Ian Blackford. I'm going to start with you, Hilary. If you can just comment on those remarks from Kwasi Kwarteng. Do you agree with that? Do you think people are questioning the impartiality of our judges?
Well, I don't know what people are saying, but it is extraordinary for a government minister to put that in an interview. He tried to sort of cover himself by saying, well, I'm not saying that, but other people are saying it. This is part of a pattern. This is about the rule of law and the government adhering to the norms. And we saw Boris Johnson last week saying, I will never apply for an extension, even though the law requires him to do so if he doesn't get a deal. And this caused deep unease, and that's why Robert Buckland, I think, was forced earlier, given the briefings that appear to have come out of Number 10, to issue that statement, because he needs to make it clear, as the principal law officer, that the government is committed to upholding the rule of law, but also trusts the judges to make their own decision. Now, it's a very unusual, indeed unprecedented decision by the Court of Session in Scotland, and the Supreme Court will decide. But the judges were pretty clear. They said, Boris Johnson, prorogued Parliament, sent us away for a reason other than the one he gave to Parliament and to the Queen.
The inference of those comments and of others is that the legal challenges that many in your party have brought are dragging the courts into politics, that they are undermining the integrity, forcing them, apolitical judges, to become political. Do you accept that? Acknowledge
No,
that?
I don't, because the courts are very, very reluctant to invade Parliament's territory. Go right back to the Bill of Rights, the deal. We don't interfere in the courts don't interfere in the workings of Parliament. But as Keir Starmer said earlier, the court must have had its reasons to say very clearly that, in their view, the purpose of the prorogation was to stymie Parliament. And we should be sitting. I mean, what this shows is that Boris Johnson's decision to send us away for 5 weeks at this crucial time for the country was wrong politically. That court today has said it was wrong legally. The Supreme Court itself will have to decide. We
saw the MPs trying to sit today. They looked a bit lost. What is the plan now? I mean, do they stay away until Tuesday? Do they accept that? I thought they were going to move across the road to Church House or something and carry on Parliament anyway.
Look, the truth is Parliament is prorogued, but the reason we need to come back is demonstrated by the Operation Yellowhammer document that's been published tonight. Now, my reaction to that is that it? Is that all that the government is going to produce? Secondly,
because you didn't think they were particularly shocking? Or...
Well, no, we've read most of that, but they are shocking, as you said in your introduction, when the government is publishing it. I mean, it is extraordinary that these are consequences that could flow from the government's own policy. Normally, when you're protecting against something like this, it's natural disaster, the action of others you don't control. It is government policy, if no agreement is reached with the EU, to inflict a no-deal Brexit, and this is what the government says could happen, and it shows, you know, Emily, that Parliament was absolutely right last week to legislate to prevent a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October, because on that occasion, far from being set against the people, what Parliament was doing was standing up for the people, jobs, communities, industries, businesses, to prevent the government from inflicting these potential consequences on the people that we represent. And we should be inside Parliament now, continuing to hold the government to account, because the government has lost a great deal of trust.
Hilary Benn, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's go now. The release of the Yellowhammer documents is a stark reminder of what could be at stake. Let's just go straight to Tobias Ellwood, who was a minister until very recently. You heard what Hilary Benn said yesterday. Parliament is the one standing up now for the people. This is a shocking admission by the government's own hand of what at present is its own policy if it doesn't have a deal.
Well, can I just firstly react to Hilary Benn talking about no deal. We don't want a no deal. We can see the reasons why that in the Operation Yellowhammer documents. He says what he doesn't want, but it's not clear what he does want. I want to see Parliament back in business. I want to see Parliament scrutinising government legislation. I want to see those important debates. But we haven't got a majority in this government. So any legislation they put through on policing, on infrastructure, on health or education, it won't get anywhere because the numbers aren't there. We tried having a general election or calling a general election. That was denied as well. So absolutely, I'm for Parliament doing its job. But if you recall Parliament, what are parliamentarians then expected to do? Because they will not actually admit that they are in denial about where this should all go.
I'm actually speechless. How can you talk about Parliament doing its job? Let's step back for a moment. Your Prime Minister, your government stands accused tonight in a unanimous ruling of giving unlawful advice to the Queen and stopping Parliament from being able to do its job for 5 weeks. Doesn't that make you ashamed?
Well, firstly, that isn't the outcome of the English courts, don't forget. And
that
what,
was
as
a unanimous ruling
said in his summary,
by Scottish judges today. We don't know what the English courts think yet. We won't know until Tuesday.
So the courts, as far as I am concerned, are impartial. It's absolutely right. I'm not happy with this at all. I think this is a huge distraction from the big elephant in the room, which is us resolving Brexit. I had just made it very clear. I want to see Parliament doing its job. But all these people calling for recall, all these people calling for no deal, they don't say what they actually want. And we will have to leave it till the 14th to actually allow the Supreme Court to make a judgment on that, and we should actually honour that judgment.
How can
I simply
you call
make the case.
The obstruction
yes, I want
of Parliament
to do its job.
An elephant in the room? How can you call that an elephant in the room as if it wasn't the important thing? They can't get on with even trying to work out how to resolve Brexit because they're not even allowed to do their jobs.
No, you're missing the point here. It's the most important thing. But the trouble is that all those people that you saw outside of Parliament or in the Parliament building today, they don't make it very clear what they want next. You actually saw Tom Watson announcing a different approach to Labour. And what we actually saw in the last couple of days is the most important thing to happen, which is resolving the Northern Ireland backstop, the issue to do with Leo Varadkar and what happens over there on the island of Ireland. Then the executive comes back to Parliament on the 17th, 14th to 17th of October, and we have something substantial to actually debate. I'm absolutely for you. If we could then avoid the proroguement, and which is embarrassing for government at this critical time of the country. But I simply make the case, the practical case, as a parliamentarian, how would we go forward? What would we be actually debating? The trouble is, my parliamentary colleagues are in disagreement about what they want to do next with Brexit.
I understand that, Tobias, but in a sense, you have made that point, the one that the Prime Minister wouldn't make. Why wasn't he just honest about why he was proroguing? Why didn't he say, I need to use this time to go and try and get a deal to sort out the Northern Ireland backstop? Why did he have to dress it up as something he wasn't, to a point where most of the public, even the people on his side, didn't believe his reasoning?
I'm not in government. That's something that you'd have to put to government. I simply look at things from a pragmatic perspective and what is best for the country. We need to get a deal over the line. We have 25 Labour MPs. Stephen Kinnock is leading a group of people that want a deal. The DUP are now firm that they want a deal as well. I would like a deal back on the table. It's actually one of the things we did agree last week, is actually have that put back on the table. Let's debate this in Parliament. The critical aspect of this is making sure we get something prior to the European summit itself. That should be the focus of every single parliamentarian. But as we saw today, the SNP wants something very different. Liberal Democrats want something very different. Labour are split in all sorts of ways. And this is all denying the actual promise that we made, that all these parties, or Parliament made and agreed, that we should resolve and honour the referendum result back in 2016.
Tobias Ellwood, thank you. Thanks very much indeed. We're going to go to Ian Blackford, the SNP leader in Westminster. What do you do now this week, Ian, when your MPs aren't sitting and no one has, it seems, come up with an alternative Parliament?
Well, I've written to the Prime Minister today saying that he should recall Parliament immediately. You know, this is extraordinary. The Prime Minister has broken the law by what he's doing. He's had a unanimous judgment of the court in Edinburgh telling him that this was unlawful, that he has given bad advice, let's be charitable, to the Queen. And he's shut down Parliament. When you think about what's going on, a Prime Minister shutting down Parliament for 5 weeks, locking parliamentarians out of the legislative process, when you've got a Prime Minister that is threatening to break the law by refusing to extend Article 50, I have to say to you, Emily, if these things were happening in other countries, people in the United Kingdom would be saying, what's going on? We've had a breakdown in democracy. And I hate to put it this way, you've got a Prime Minister that is behaving like a dictatorship. But when I saw those comments from Kwasi Kwarteng, you know, it's quite dreadful, it's quite insidious that a government minister is saying that some people are questioning the independence of the judiciary and whether they're politically motivated. It's worth just dwelling on what this government is doing.
Of course.
It really is quite frightening,
but you heard
the things which are going on.
You heard from Tobias Ellwood, someone who's caught, you know, right in the crossfire there, doesn't speak for the government but feels he has to defend it anyway. And it comes back to something very simple, which is that the SNP clearly aren't going to vote for any deal that Boris Johnson comes back with. And it sounds as if Labour now wants a second referendum anyway. So what would you actually be doing in this Parliament a month before, 50 days before we leave? There is nothing that you'll vote for. There is nothing that you'll agree to. What would you be doing there anyway? You're not trying to break the deadlock.
Yes, we are actually. Let's focus and champion what's happened over the course of the last few days. Parliamentarians across party have come together to rule out no deal on the 31st of October. That great unity that we had across Parliament, and I want to congratulate people for doing that.
Of course. You've ruled it out. It doesn't get us to the next step, though, does it?
Well, no, because what we need to make sure is that the government does put in place that extension, does apply for that extension. We want, and I believe other opposition parties want, an election, but we can only do it when we're safe in the knowledge that we've got that extension. But the reason that we need to be in Parliament now is because we need to debate this Yellowhammered document. I mean, what's in that Yellowhammered document is quite sobering for all of us, the threats that are there for our citizens. But we also have to question, why hasn't the government released the information that Parliament ordered it to do on what was happening between special advisers and Number 10? Because we're in a situation tonight on that specific issue that the government is in contempt of Parliament. So there are many things that we should be doing tomorrow and going into next week. And it is the case that the government should recognise the judgment from the court in Scotland, should recognise the judgment against them, and should recall Parliament immediately. That would be the right thing to do. That would be respectful to the court. We've got a Prime Minister that's behaving in a way which is quite unprecedented, and I have to say that he doesn't show that he has the dignity to respect the office of being Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. That's pretty shocking.
Ian Blackford, thank you very much indeed. Well, the release of the Yellowhammer documents we were talking about is a stark reminder of what could be at stake if the government fails to secure a deal in the coming weeks. The PM today talked up progress in a live Q&A session on Facebook. He said the mood is changing, the ice floes are cracking, there is movement under the keel. But how is all this uncertainty playing outside Parliament amongst UK businesses? Are they finally getting ready for a no-deal Brexit? Are they relieved about the prospect of an Article 50 extension until January? With new evidence of just how badly UK firms would respond to that no-deal Brexit, here's our economics editor, Ben Chu.
Westminster has been roiled by Brexit in recent days.
This is not, however, a normal prorogation. It is not typical. It is not standard.
But how is this constitutional turmoil going down among UK businesses?
If you really want to delay Brexit beyond October the 31st, which is what you seem to want to do, then vote for an election and let the people decide. Let the people decide.
The government has launched a major new advertising and information campaign urging firms to get ready for Brexit. But new survey data seen by Newsnight shows that not only are many firms not ready for Brexit, but that a no-deal Brexit could force many into economically damaging actions. 24% say that they could cut investment, 22% say that they would slash hiring, and perhaps most worryingly of all, 18% say that it could move some or even all of their operations overseas.
Some say the government's reliance on its website to transmit no-deal guidance to firms is a serious potential problem.
You have some people which are super prepared, but you will find that there's people that are simply have not done anything. They're looking for guidance, and I don't think the government website necessarily is as easy as the government makes out. You need someone hand-holding you through the whole process. From our view, as a transporter and logistics company, there's elements of it which are not clear, and certainly it could all fall down.
Describe what all falling down means.
It means a lot of phone calls and unhappy customers. But I think managing expectations is key. We're expecting a lot of hauliers not to enter the UK in the run-up to Brexit, as we had the dry run in March. Drivers were not willing to come here, hauliers were not willing to come here, so you were left with a few people that were willing to come, and you had this capacity crunch. It was the prices started escalating quite quickly, and we'll probably see that again.
The government has stepped up practical assistance to navigate a no-deal scenario. As well as the £100 million business awareness campaign, the government has announced an extra £16 million for training in customs and the automatic enrolment of 88,000 firms in the most basic paperwork needed to continue trading with the EU after a no-deal Brexit. But those that rely on European regulatory approval to trade point out that there is a limit to how prepared they can practically be.
So the government is saying it'll all be fine as long as businesses do what they need to do to get ready. Is that accurate from your perspective?
No, it's not accurate at all. We have followed the government guidance. As I said, I think we were pretty on top of it anyway as experienced exporters outside of the Eurozone. So according to the government's checklist, Farmer House is ready. But as I said, our government cannot speak on behalf of our customers' regulators. So until we have confirmation that our customers can continue to accept UK pharmaceuticals after a no-deal Brexit, that 48% of our revenue is at risk.
And how does the possible further Brexit delay and today's constitutional shock affect things?
Since the referendum, businesses have been looking for certainty. They don't want a messy and disorderly exit on the 31st of October any more than they wanted one on the 29th of March. So they've been thinking about what they need to do to prepare. All of the politics doesn't really help with the practicalities of who will I be able to hire, what customs arrangements will I need to follow, what rules will I need to adhere to. These are the things that businesses really care about more than what's going on down in Westminster. What we're looking at now is potentially another pushback of the deadline, which might avoid that messy and disorderly exit that we know that businesses want to avoid, but doesn't give any greater certainty about what the future holds beyond that.
But for many businesses, Brexit certainty is like a horizon that only seems to stretch further and further away.
That was Ben Chew. Well, a government spokesman said, "We are spending £108 million to promote and support businesses in ensuring they're ready for Brexit, including a national programme of business readiness and helping exporters to prepare for and capitalise on new opportunities."